Good evening, Stevens Point, and welcome to a spooktacular episode of the Sports Hub. I'm your host, Will Haroldson, and alongside me are my ghoulish partners, Liam Statz and Brody Kupsky. We had an exciting weekend here with sports here at UWSP, with UWSP men's hockey team beginning their season, and then also the volleyball team preparing for the WIAC tournament, and also we had some regional sports action. All of this and more when we return. Now for your UWSP athletic updates. The Pointers football team traveled to Eau Claire to take on the Blue Golds in a battle of the WIAC's only two teams that are winless in conference play. While the Pointers put up a good fight in the first half, only trailing 27-18 on halftime, a 21-point third quarter by the Blue Golds ultimately spelled doom for the Pointers, and the Blue Golds pulled away, winning 48-26. So fellas, safe to say year one of Coach Vinay's rebuild of the Pointers program has not gone the way that we have all hoped. What are the next steps in turning this program around?
I would say just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, it's not always going to be perfect right away. Obviously, you hate to see him lose a lot, but you just gotta just keep pushing through and maybe try different things towards the end of the year to see what might work next year.
And 26 points now. Stevens Point scored 35 against Simpson College, but 26 points is their second most points they've scored this season. So it's nice to see that the offense has kind of taken steps forward over the past two games and scored consistently, getting in the end zone twice in two consecutive games.
Going back to your point about just how are they going to, they got to power through. They got to keep their heads high. I mean, there's really nothing else to it. I think that this season is pretty much a wash, and they're not going to do anything with the rest of the season. So they just got to keep standing tall, basically. I honestly don't know how else they can improve besides that.
Right. I mean, I guess you can only go up from here since they've gotten their 0-5 in conference play. They have really, besides this past game against Eau Claire, they were never really in any WIAC conference games. But looking forward towards this Saturday's game against UW-Oshkosh, what are you looking to see out of this Pointers team on Senior Day? Because for a lot of players, this is going to be their last time ever playing a football game. So what are you looking to see out of this team?
I would just say just play your hardest. You're playing a tough opponent in UW-Oshkosh. You just got to play your heart out, play for your fans, and give Gerke one last hoorah.
Yeah, and looking at WIAC standings at the top of it's lacrosse and Whitewater. Platteville was actually up there last week when they defeated Whitewater, but they lost to Stout in overtime. So it's really a kind of a clear cut who's going to be up there. And if it ended today, it would actually favor Whitewater because Whitewater's got the head-to-head victory over UW lacrosse. But there's a lot of season left to play. There's 2 games left, and there's a lot of good teams in this WIAC. But and looking forward to the next couple years, there's always growing pains whenever there's a new coaching staff, right? And Coach Luke Vinay had a lot of success as the offensive coordinator for UW-Oshkosh in his tenure there. Now, not much of that has transferred over from Oshkosh, but it's also a small sample size, just 1 year. If you had to identify a thing that you think maybe Coach Vinay is going to change in the next couple years, what do you think that is going to be?
I would say just having the offensive line block. I mean, we were talking about earlier in this year that the offensive line has kind of left Trey Schrader out for dead, really. I mean, the guy's scrambling around half the time and really can't get anything going if, your offensive line is not blocking well enough. So maybe you'll work on offensive line scheming or just working some passing plays out, running plays out. I mean, the Wildcat worked for them against Simpson College very well. I mean, they scored every single time they ran out of it, but maybe they just got to try stuff out, maybe, fix things here and there, and hopefully hope for the best.
And from a recruiting standpoint, obviously, anytime a school's recruit, you can recruit better. How exactly does a team go about recruiting players to come and play for your program?
Well, it's kind of hard when you're in a slump because it's not appealing to new players. You could appeal to them by saying, because we're in a slump, that means we're looking for people to step up. That could be your opportunity to really get out there and show people what you're made of. But like I said, when you're in a slump, not a lot of people are going to want to play for you. It's just the way it is. You're the bottom of the barrel. But on the other hand, like I just said, that gives more people opportunity to play.
Definitely gives a lot of players time to show out. And I think while there have been a lot of negatives to come from this season, you can look at the past 2 games with they're getting better offensively. Now all they really need to do is step up that defense, and they'll start to figure things out. I think they're trending in the right direction based on the past 2 games. Well, the WIAC volleyball regular season has officially come to a close, and that means it is conference tournament time. Finishing with a 23-6 overall record and a 4-3 conference record, the Pointers locked up the 3rd seed in the conference tournament and a first-round home matchup against UW River Falls. Should the Pointers defeat the Falcons, the next step would be taking on the hottest team in America and the UW Oshkosh Titans, who, if you don't know, have won an incredible 19 straight games. So, Brody, the Pointers had another great season. There's no question about it. But now it's a completely new one. So what are the steps that the Pointers got to do to make a run here in this WIAC tournament, and what do you think of their chances at doing so?
So I guess just looking back at the conference play, they did sweep River Falls, mind you, 3-0 in conference play a couple weeks ago. So they have a pretty good shot against River Falls in this WIAC tournament, especially being at home in Berg Gym. I believe that they just got to keep it simple, just keep playing how they're playing, and hope for the best. I mean, they have a pretty good shot to make a run for the WIAC tournament, but you just got to play how you play and hope for the best.
And first place, Whitewater won the regular season. Second place was Oshkosh with that ridiculous 19-game win streak. And Brody, I believe you and I called the one game against Oshkosh when the Titans came up to Berg and beat the Pointers 3-1. That was a very impressive team, and the Pointers are going to have themselves a matchup if they can get it down to Oshkosh and try to get revenge there. But Liam, we look at it in a way where getting a win in your home gym is great, but always going to play opponents in their own gym is a difficult standpoint. How do you prepare yourself for going into a hostile territory? I mean, we're talking theoretically here. Stevens Point still has to beat River Falls, and they could very well lose that game. But think of it as a standpoint of a team going. How do you prepare yourself to go into a hostile environment?
You got to get into the right mindset about it. I mean, you have to understand you're not going to be in your familiar territory. There's not going to be a lot of people there to support you, but you just have to take one step at a time, get in the right mindset for it, go there with the drive to win, and then pull out of there.
Yeah, that's a great point because, I mean, if you look at all these games you watch, they are hostile environments. I mean, and I say hostile in the fans, not that it's aggressive and dangerous to a point, but you know what I mean. But all these WIAC schools have such strong fan bases, and Oshkosh especially, they have just a tremendous athletics program. It's going to be difficult should the Pointers, they got to get past River Falls, who's a good team as well. But should they get there, it's going to be a difficult task to stop literally the hottest team in the country.
Yeah, without question. I mean, when you and I were calling that game, Oshkosh looked phenomenal. Nothing was really stopping them. And so going into Oshkosh, and I have been to Oshkosh a few times, and it's a good environment for them. So say the Pointers do beat River Falls, because we can't always assume anything. They'll have to just play out of their minds just to beat Oshkosh. They just got to play really good volleyball and just really, like I said before, hope for the best. There's a lot riding on the line if they beat Oshkosh.
And Stevens Point has, they played Whitewater this year, and they went actually to Whitewater, lost to the Warhawks in extra. But that was a really close game. I really do like Stevens Point, and I know we're a little biased here. We're SPTV, Stevens Point related athletics. I do like their chances if they're able to, and this is a woulda, coulda, shoulda. If they can go to Oshkosh and pick up a W against the Titans there, I like their chances against Whitewater because they were just that close, a couple of plays away from picking up an upset in Whitewater. But it's always that giant hurdle of getting over Oshkosh because, man, they were impressive, like you said. When Point played them in 3 out of the 4 Stevens Point was never in it. It really, I mean, the score may have been a little closer, but realistically, they were never in it. And that's definitely something you got to change. Is that something, the old cliche of a game that happened in the past, does it get stuck in your mind and going into that upcoming matchup? Do you worry, oh gosh, are we going to just repeat what happened?
I mean, you could always think that, but sometimes you just got to move on from it. You play like a 3-game series against a team. You lose the first day. Oh, we'll just move past it here. Let's go get to the next game, play well. That's just what Point has to do. They just can't worry about what happened during the regular season. I mean, same thing with River Falls. The Pointers just have to move on. Oh yeah, we beat them in the regular season. Now it's just conference play. They want to win this tournament just as much as Point does. So you just got to move past it. Focus on, this is a completely different time playing now than a month ago. So you just got to play like it's an actual tournament.
Right, I think that's a great point, Brody, because something I always draw attention to is, a lot, I'm assuming all of us watch ESPN. All of us watch professional NFL football. And one thing that this typical scenario brings me back to, one time Rex Ryan was talking about him being the head coach of the New York Jets, and they played Tom Brady and the Patriots, and they just got destroyed in the regular season. But then they finished the season hot and played the Patriots in the playoffs and actually beat them. So you can use it as motivation, or you can just completely forget about it and move on. Is there a certain aspect you would say they should focus on, use it as motivation, or should they just completely move on from it?
I would say they need to use it as motivation. They know that they can beat this team. They're the same players that have been on a team that they defeated in the regular season. They know that they can beat them, and so I think they need to use that.
Without question, I think that's a great point. Well, to say the Pointers hockey team series against St. Norbert was an emotional roller coaster would be an understatement. The Pointers suffered a gut-wrenching defeat in overtime to the Green Knights in the first game of the series on Friday. Then in Game 2, when it seemed like St. Norbert had control for most of the game, Pointers freshman Mick Hennigan tied the game up 1-1 in the third period and forced overtime. The Pointers and Green Knights would eventually go to shootouts, and some controversial calls later, it was the Pointers' Noah Finstrom who gave the Pointers the shootout victory to improve to 0-1-1. So Liam, what were your takeaways from Saturday's shootout win? Like we said, we were broadcasting the game for 90 FM. There were 3 different occasions where we thought the game was over. Stevens Point didn't look good until Mick Hennigan tied the game up, and then they kind of looked strong from that point.
My 3 takeaways is that the Pointers are playing very physical. Now, the Saturday's game was such a physical game. There were hits from both sides, a couple of injuries. Like when we were in the broadcaster's booth down in St. Norbert's zone, there was that giant hit in the corner in the first period. I'm like, all right, they're here to play, and then didn't play until the third period. But my second takeaway from that is that when Stevens Point got their backs against the wall, they show up. It's weird. It's weird that that's what it takes for them to actually be productive. But, I mean, I'll take it if that's what it's going to take to win games. From the shootout, Johnny Roberts was just a brick wall. The whole game, he had, I think, 44 saves that whole game. He was just a brick wall, and it didn't change in the shootout.
Yeah, you got to credit Proctor as well for Stevens Point. While he didn't have as many saves, I think it was around 24, 30, something like that. He had a really good game and actually a big-time poke check in shootouts when it was a bit of a risk giving up that, but he poked it away. But one thing that kind of stood out to me, and one thing that was particularly negative that we have all been talking about after the game was over, was their execution in the power play. Stevens Point had 5 power plays. One of them, they didn't take 1 shot. 2 of them, they took 1. One of them, they took 5. And then one of them, they took 2. It was not an area that they excelled. Sure, you can credit the St. Norbert penalty kill because they are one of the best in the country, but you have to be able to execute in the power play.
Well, especially when you're a team like Stevens Point. I mean, it was almost brutal watching them in the power play. Granted, St. Norbert's a great team. Don't get us wrong. They're a great team. But you just gotta try and do something, take more shots. It was almost ugly reading the stats off. I mean, I was reading them and I'm just like, how did we not shoot more? So they got to try something. You just got to try to shoot more shots, maybe try to get open passes here and there. And one of my takeaways from the game was just a little bit of sloppiness in the second period and a little bit in the third. It was just, I mean, missed passes, missed opportunities. I mean, power plays, yikes. So I don't know what Point's got to do to fix it, but, it's a long season.
There were a few things that was a really physical game. And, there was a few times during the broadcast where we were like, man, I'm surprised they didn't call a few of these things dead. There was a few missed calls. But, let's take a look at this looking forward. They have 2 games this week. They're taking on Gustavus Adolphus College on Friday and then the College of St. Scholastica on Saturday. 2 games, both in KB Willett Arena, 2 games that they should be able to win. But what's the strategy for Stevens Point? Because penalty-wise, they played a clean game. I think St. Norbert only had 2 power plays. Stevens Point shut it down both times. But what are some improvements that Stevens Point can take going into these upcoming matchups to really get in the win column? Because they actually did drop, like we said before the show, they dropped down from 10 in the country to 12, which not a big deal because in hindsight, rankings really don't mean anything until you get to the playoffs. But what can Stevens Point do to get this hockey team rolling and winning again? Not that they won in overtime and shootouts, which goes down as a tie. How can they get officially back in the win column?
Well, they need to take. It was a moral victory. Saturday's shootout win was a moral victory. They need to ride that into the next series. Pick up both wins at both the Gustavus and St. Olaf, I think.
College of St. Scholastica.
College of St. Scholastica. They need to pick up 2 wins there. If they are managed to do that, I think that they're going to get that back on that train. You have last year where they only lost 1 home game and had the best record in the WIAC.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good WIAC teams as well. UW Stout had a very good weekend. River Falls, a good squad. This WIAC, we talk about the WIAC being a really competitive conference in every sport, but hockey this year, particularly, it feels like it's going to be the most competitive because, nothing against Northland College. The past couple of years, they have really struggled in the WIAC. But this year, it feels like I think anybody can beat anybody on any given night, honestly.
Without question. I mean, there's a lot of teams around that, they'll play well, early in the season, but then just fall apart kind of mid-season and just kind of lose it. But, I feel like a lot of these teams, they'll just stay consistent the whole year and kind of give the conference a run for their money. I mean, a lot of great teams.
Stevens Point, obviously, they were predicted to finish first in the regular season and championship in a WIAC tournament by the media, and for good reason. There's a lot of senior leadership that came back. Wagner, the goaltender, a veteran goaltender, very talented goaltender, comes back. Jordan Fader comes back. And then they have Wilson Northey, another one of those captains. What does senior leadership like that do for you? Because they're using that extra year of eligibility that the NCAA did, which in my opinion is the best thing that the NCAA has done in a long time. But what does that senior leadership do for your squad like this?
It gives you a lot of locker room morale. It gives you people to look up to learn from. Alex Proctor and Matthias Smith are 2 new goaltenders. They've never played NCAA before. And they're going to look up to Ryan Wagner and kind of see how he's able to control himself both physically and mentally. Because a good chunk of what the locker room is a mental game. If you don't have a locker room, then you're just not going to be there. And I think that you having these 3 seniors who took their following years of eligibility are really going to be there for these younger players as they come in and out of the NCAA program.
For sure.
Without question, kind of what Liam's saying, you have that presence in the locker room that these guys can lead you places and, they can teach the younger guys, hey, do this, do that, whatever the case is. They have that presence there to just lead the guys to better things. Obviously, there's a lot of juniors looking at the roster here, a ton of juniors almost. So they'll have, that leadership to tell the juniors, hey, this is what we want you guys to do, the next few years here. So having that veteran presence is a huge help for the Pointers and kind of leads them in the right direction.
Right, and basically everybody who is, except for the freshmen on the squad, basically everybody has 2 years of eligibility left. unless you're a senior. If you're a junior, which you said a lot of them, because of that COVID year granted, a lot of them are going to have 2 years of eligibility left, and man, that is going to be good for them if they can really pick the brains of these seniors who have been through it, who have won WACs, who have won national championships in 2019. It's going to be beneficial for them in the long run for sure. Well, that is going to do it for our UWSP athletic updates. We're going to take a quick break and come back with some regional sports action. So don't go away because we'll be right back.
College has given me the flexibility to pursue my passions and my interests, and I've recreated my identity for myself aside from just being an athlete.
My greatest personal discovery has been that I am capable of doing things that I didn't know I was capable of doing.
To be able to study what I wanted to and continue to play the sport I love, all of those things came together very nicely in one package in Division III.
Cool. Welcome back to the Sports Hub. Let's get into some regional sports action. The Milwaukee Bucks are the only undefeated team remaining in the entire NBA, and at the moment, the undisputed best team in the NBA. Giannis is tearing up teams every game, scoring 34.4 points per game and snatching 14 boards per game. Brook Lopez is putting work in as well, scoring around 14 points per game and getting close to 4 blocks per game. So Brody, what do you make of the Bucks' start of the season so far?
I'd say they're the best team in the NBA right now. They have a really solid shot at winning the title. I'm not going to say they're going to win the title because, obviously that's going to be held against me this whole season. So I don't want to say anything too soon, but they have a pretty good shot at winning this year. I mean, they have the team to do it, and they're without Chris Middleton, which is huge. If you can play without him, I mean, obviously you would love to have him back, but playing without him is almost like it's really helping them. Looking at some of their schedule coming up, they have 2 games against Detroit. One is tonight, Halloween night, and one is on Wednesday. And then they go to play at Minnesota and then Oklahoma City to round out the week. So realistically, they could be 9-0 at the end of the week here. So I would say the Bucks have a really, really good team.
I'm not really into basketball as much, but I agree with everything Brody said. The Bucks are just super dominant right now. They've won their last 5 games. I do think that they've got. If they don't go and win the title, they are going to go really far.
Yeah, it's a championship or bust season, to be completely honest. The Bucks really felt like last year they were still the best team, and if they would have had Chris Middleton for maybe those final 2 games against the Celtics, they probably would have went on, but coulda, shoulda, woulda. Doesn't mean anything. If this happened, that would have happened. Doesn't mean anything. Ultimately, Ashton was talking about it. Ashton, who's not here, he's actually not a little under the weather, so get well soon, Ashton. But we were talking, Cleveland Cavaliers look good as well, so this is going to be a really strong division, I believe. The Eastern Central Division in the Eastern Conference. It's going to be really strong, without question.
Yeah, without question with that. Even, besides the Cavaliers, I mean, the Bulls are playing pretty solid too. The Pacers and Pistons are kind of just in their own area. They're just trying to rebuild, trying to get by. But it'll be a tough division for the Bucks. Obviously, the Bucks are playing really well. Cavaliers still playing pretty well, and Bulls are, they can give teams a run for their money. But I believe it's just the Bucks division to lose.
Honestly, it really is, and I think the Eastern Conference is probably their conference to lose at this point. And 5 games, not the largest sample size, but we look at them, 5 really good games that they have played from beginning to end. It's really been the story for me at this point. I think this Bucks team is as good as advertised, and they have a chance of going a long way. That's for sure. Well, for our final segment of the day, we're going to finish off the show with how we normally do, our Rankin segment. And for those who are new here, Liam, we're looking at you. This is where we go around and we list our top 3 moments of the sports from last week. I'll start first, and then Brody, and then Liam will finish off. So for my third place in Rankin, I'm going to go with Game 1 of the World Series. Philadelphia Phillies were down 5-0 to the Houston Astros, and they came back and won in extra innings 6-5. That was a ridiculous display of just cool, calm, and collectiveness by that entire team. And Ashton was talking about sweeping. That didn't work out. But, just to show the resilience in coming back and sweeping, or not getting swept by the Houston and coming back and winning the game is really impressive. For number 2, I'm going to go a little bit out of left field here on this one. I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers game against the Buffalo Bills. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, Will, they lost the game. Now, keep this in mind. Statistically, the Packers actually outgained Buffalo offensively, and in the second half, they intercepted Josh Allen twice. They also lost a lot of key pieces on the defense and only gave up 27 points, which is the lowest amount of points that the Bills have scored at home all season, as well as rookies Romeo Doubs and Samori Toure actually catching his first career touchdown pass, both good plays. I think, the Packers are 3-5. They've lost 4 in a row, but that second half against Buffalo, it showed that they're definitely a team that can improve and can move on. They'll play Detroit this weekend, a game they should win, but at this point you never know. But I think that second half against Buffalo was big for Green Bay. And for number 1, I'm going to go in a college football and one specific game in general. I'm going to go with Kansas State obliterating Oklahoma State 48-0. This season in college football has been anything but normal. All the teams that are supposed to be good are not as great. Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, they're all kind of mediocre. And then teams that aren't supposed to be good, i.e. Kansas State, are very good. Illinois, very good. But Kansas State beat Oklahoma State 48-0. 48-0? How does that happen against the number 9 team in the country? That's my number 1 thing. It's been crazy in college football. Brody, your turn.
So my number 3 was going to be what Will's number 1 was. Kansas State absolutely obliterated Oklahoma State. Sorry there. Looking at some stats real quick, Will Howard, Kansas State's quarterback here, went 21 for 36 with 296 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Their backup too, I'll admit. Adrian Martinez is supposed to be the starter. That was the backup quarterback.
That's even a worse look. Sorry, Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders, Oklahoma State quarterback, went 13 for 26 with 147 yards. Obviously no touchdowns. Pretty rough game for a guy like him. So good on Kansas State. Great win for them. My number 2 is going to be the Milwaukee Bucks. Really showing out early in the season. Five good wins. A lot of guys stepping up, especially in the loss of Chris Middleton for now. They really have been stepping up and playing really well. And my number 1, I'm going to really, really go out of left field here. I'm going to talk about NASCAR. So my favorite sport growing up, and yes, it is a sport. It is a sport. I grew up watching NASCAR. I like a lot of it. And this past weekend was the last race in the round of 8 for NASCAR playoffs. And obviously the winner was Christopher Bell, really solid young driver, and he has a good shot at winning the championship. But that was probably the least talked about point of that race. The last lap, Ross Chastain, who was fighting for a playoff spot, or fighting to keep his playoff spot, was a couple positions behind Denny Hamlin, who was going to advance if he just crushed a couple positions ahead of Ross. Ross Chastain pulled the ultimate gamer move, rode the wall on the outside of Martinsville Speedway, which is really tough to do, especially with a 2-ton stock car. He rode the wall around and ended up passing Hamlin to keep his spot in the playoffs. So that is my number 1 because it was just so insane. If you ever see it, watch a video of it. It's so tough to do, and it does get talked about a lot, but it's an insane move.
It's been a pretty intense season of NASCAR as well. A few upset races, a few races that you expect to go, but it's been kind of like college football. It's been all over the place, and now you've had some time to study. Let's hear your top 3, Liam.
Well, my number 3, you left me kind of scrambling here, Will, so I had to kind of scramble to put some stuff together.
Okay.
But my number 3 is the Tennessee Volunteers just destroying the Kentucky Wildcats 44-6. It's nuts. Tennessee will improve to 8-0. They're number 2 in the nation. It really wasn't surprising, but even Point loses less bad than that. I don't understand what's happening to Kentucky. They're just not showing up, I guess, this season. It's not great for them, to be honest. My number 2 was the game 1 of the MLB World Series. I really like that the Phillies, who are, I don't know if they're considered, well, they actually are considered favorites because nobody really likes the Astros at this point besides Texas. But it was cool to see them really kind of play into that and take the first game of the series. And they dropped the second one, but, and my number 1, you're going to hate me for this, it was Toronto, again, blowing their lead in the third period and then losing in overtime to the Anaheim Ducks, which are currently 2-6-1. Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm going to kind of steal something here. That's dang it. They looked really dominant that entire game, and then the third period gave up the lead and it was tied, and we went into overtime and then lost in overtime. First overtime period didn't need a shootout to the Anaheim Ducks, who are 2-6-1. Toronto Maple Leafs will fall to 4-4-2. That's just really cool to see that they still haven't figured out how to kind of hold on to their lead.
It's early in the season. They can change things around, but you can see Brody kind of have a visceral reaction.
Don't worry, guys. They'll turn it around.
They'll turn it around, he says. Well, that's going to do it for this spectacular episode of the Sports Hub. A reminder to tune into SPTV News, released here every Friday. And if you found yourself enjoying what you saw today, why not give us a like and maybe even consider subscribing? With that being said, I want to thank all of you for watching, and we will see you next time.